Hey everyone, welcome to my chat with Freely Ashley. I found Ashley online after she went viral on TikTok for saying things that are completely reasonable, as you know. I then followed her on Instagram and contacted her asking her to speak to me. To my surprise, she said yes, and also to my surprise, we had a really excellent chat. We actually really get along and have a lot in common, even though we're in different countries. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Please be aware that there are two places in this conversation where the Wi-Fi dipped and Ashley cut out. I've edited those and, being the entrepreneur that I am, have placed a short 10-second advert for my website in those two spaces. If you're listening to this as soon as it's released, I have a bunch of calendars left that don't start until February of this year, so get yourself one while there's still time. If you're listening to this after February, there's probably no calendars left, but if you still want one, basically you can get a whole bunch of really good quality prints for a tenner. That's pretty good, isn't it? Anyway, grab yourself a cup of tea, coffee, hot chocolate, Horlicks, Ovaltine, whatever your favourite hot bevy is, and enjoy this chat. Thanks!
On social media, especially, people are trying so hard to prove that they're right that they will never admit that they could be wrong.
Yes, so professional. Hi, Freely Ashley. I saw you from TikTok. I think I saw you from YouTube actually, because I don't have a TikTok. And then I looked you up on Instagram and I really liked what you had to say about coming from the left and realizing that a lot of things you thought you knew, you've been lied to about. So if you don't mind, letting everybody know who you are and how you came to this.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for reaching out to me and wanting to have a conversation. I always really like finding new people, and I've watched some of your content, and I think you're quite humorous. You have my kind of sense of humor, so I appreciate that. But yeah, so I was a leftist in up until like 2016 was probably like the biggest craziest year that I got. I had a huge case of TDS, that's for sure. I hated Donald Trump with everything in me, whereas I didn't even really care about him, before he ran for president. So it's kind of silly to me that I hated him so much to the degree that I did. But anyway, my husband ended up voting for him, and we weren't married at the time. Actually, people get confused about that a lot, but he ended up voting for him, and he wasn't super political at that time, and I chastised him pretty good for voting. And I think I said stuff like, you don't even know what's going on and you have no idea. And he goes, okay, well, I probably should learn then. So he went and kind of started delving into things, and he got a lot more political, and he started kind of questioning the things that I was saying, and a lot of the things that were being promoted by the left, and me being challenged. It was just like an automatic, I just became so angry and defensive, and I would get super mad and just kind of fly off the handle. And it was just kind of that carried on. We just kept having conversations, and he kept kind of gently challenging my point of view. And I kind of started realizing, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I literally just have no clue what I'm saying, or at least had no forethought into the ideas behind it, the history behind a lot of these ideas, especially in regards to like socialism and stuff like that. It was all just nice things that I heard that sounded good in theory. And I was like, oh, well, if it sounds good, it must be good. And through that process, I started doing a lot more research. I started looking into things. I started listening to different perspectives, and slowly over time, I just started changing my mind. And by the time 2019 came around, I was like, I can't be on the left anymore. I can't support what's going on. I can't support, especially just all the contradictions, all of the hypocrisy amongst it as well. And then by the time 2020 hit, and all of that went down. And by that time, my husband and I had gotten married. We had babies. And it was just, I had a much different perspective of the world in general, in relation to just my personal life, my family life, and then combined with like this political shift. And I just was like, yep, I'm not I'm not down with all of this crazy authoritarian like regime style stuff. And 2020 was a really big eye opener in a lot of ways in that regard. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Sorry if I rambled a little bit, but
no, that's all good. I really relate to you in that sense, and I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people are on a similar journey, and they are questioning themselves and their beliefs and why they believe the things that they believe and why they're so emotionally attached to some things that they believe that might not be true. Like, and I wanted to ask actually, when you and your husband, before you were married and he was challenging your views, when did you, first of all, did you feel defensive? And second of all, if you challenged his views, did he get defensive? Was there a difference?
yeah, so there was a big difference. I did automatically feel like I had to go on the defensive. I felt that when my ideas were challenged or my perspectives were challenged, I felt like it was a direct reflection of who I was as a person, which really, now that I look back in hindsight, it's very telling that when you get so emotionally attached to your beliefs and your ideals and your values and all of that, which are very important in life, but when you're overly attached to this point where you cannot see reason, you feel like it's an attack on who you are, that's not conducive to any type of like critical thinking or anything like that. But when I would kind of challenge him, he would just say, okay, well, what's your reasoning behind that? Do you have any evidence? Do you have any proof? And he would just, try to get me to get to a point where I realized that my ideas were based on emotional appeal as opposed to actual facts and data and that sort of thing.
It almost feels like it's a completely different way of navigating the world. Like when I come from the left and I was brought up on the left, and my whole family said, vote Labour, because we're like poor. We weren't even working class, we're poor. And you always vote Labour there for the poor people and for the working class and for the minorities and whatever. And I never ever thought in my life that I would ever reconsider being on the left. And I felt like maybe in 2017, I started to feel like maybe I don't necessarily belong on the left, and I am a little bit more open to voting when it comes to voting specifically for things that I locally believe in, rather than which team I should be on because of my identity in society. And also I started to wonder if it's really hard to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the things you thought might not be true or might be distorted in some sort of way. Like, I was definitely one of the people that thought anyone who's not left is definitely a bad person. There's no other excuse. You're a bad person, you're just evil, you want poor people dead and all this stuff. And now I look back on it and I cringe, because I just think there's a little bit, like, I forgive myself a little bit because I was young and because I grew up in this mindset. But I also think, wow, I thought I was so open-minded and I thought I was so, sort of critically thinking, and I really wasn't. I really was just falling into a safe place. And safe place, that's so ironic I said that, but I really was just, it was the comfort of knowing all the answers because I'm a good person, and that's just the way it is if you're a good person. You don't have to explain yourself if you're a good person. And that really shattered a lot of things for me, and I think I've been on a massive journey. I learned a lot from being cancelled as well. Excuse me, I've got a sore throat. I learned a lot from being cancelled as well. And that really shifted a lot of my perspectives on a lot of things. And so when I saw you talking about coming from the left, and, what you said about making your arguments were coming from an emotional place, and what you've just said just now about how you felt like it was an attack on you, that it really is a mindset where you take it on as your identity. Whereas when you offload that, there's a little bit of freedom, and maybe that's the mindset that people like your husband were coming from, because he doesn't feel like it breaks who he is to be challenged. It's just a different idea, it's just a different perspective. And that's crazy that we got to the point where if you present somebody with a different perspective, you're breaking who they are.
Yeah. And I felt like I was like listening to my own perspective when you were talking there, because yeah, I grew up really poor. I grew up kind of surrounded by this mindset of like, especially victim mentality. And, you know, everything's out of my control. I can't change anything. These are just the circumstances and I need help, instead of just, I can help myself and I can get out of that type of thing. And yeah, like, I feel like when you grow up like that, and the same type of mindset of like, anyone who doesn't believe in the things that I do or doesn't view the world in my way, then they're just bad and evil. That's such a reductionist and intolerant point of view, in my opinion. And it's just so funny to me, and so in like an ironic sort of way, that people on the left can't see that. Like, yeah. And I used to do the same thing. I used to demonize all these different groups of people and then talk about how inclusive and tolerant and how, you know, that I was, when in reality, like, no, you're just like, I just tolerated people who agreed with me. And that's not any type of actual tolerance. That's just groupthink and a cult mindset, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. And also it's very bizarre and strange to put yourself on a pedestal of I'm a good person and everybody else isn't. And I don't know if I necessarily grew up with that specific mindset, but it definitely entered my world at some point. And I think that sort of thinking for me really ramped up and started in around about maybe 2012 or 2013. And I do think I was influenced by social media, because I think on Facebook in 2013 is when I first started getting really stressed out about the news and things that were happening around us. And, oh, there's going to be more austerity and the Tories are going to get into power. And you probably felt that when Donald Trump got in. It was that sort of world-ending feeling. Like when the Conservatives in the UK got in, I felt a black cloud hanging over my head. Like it was like the end of the world. And now I don't feel that way. Even if I don't want Labour to get in on the next election in the UK, because I think they're insane. You can't even say what a woman is, you shouldn't be in power. But I know for a fact that if they get in, I'm not going to be feeling like it's the end of the world. I'm just going to be like, oh boy, we're in trouble. But we've got to do something about it. And we do have power as people. And when you're on the left, you don't feel like you have power. So you're more likely to justify acting out with violence and aggression and intolerance.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so, you know, when I look back and I try to like put myself back in the mindset that I was in, it's actually very difficult for me now, because I've just changed the way I think. It's almost the polar opposite at this point. And there's still some things that I have to kind of fight, like, you know, sometimes like I can just be a reactive person in general, and so I have to really kind of take a step back sometimes and be like, nope, like just don't respond to this or don't do that or anything, And so there's certain things that I still kind of like, I catch myself doing still. And I'm like, no, that's not conducive. That's not productive. But I did feel this, like, I literally felt like the world was going to end when Trump got into office. And I think a lot of that has to do with like the media constantly pushing that type of mindset and just saying like, look, he's going to ruin our country. He's going to take all these rights away. And I remember on election night, when the results came in, because it was super late at night here, I had a meltdown and I started hysterically crying. Like, I'm not kidding. Like it was like the no girl meme come to life. Luckily I did it in the privacy of my own home, but yeah. And that's just that, it's the level of just emotional attachment to something that you should not be this, like, politics are important, and it is very important to be aware of what's going on. And a lot of the issues going on are emotionally charged issues. They affect people personally, but to invest that much into it, like I was literally sitting there saying like, gay people are going to lose their rights and blah, blah, blah. And just off the rails. And it was once I started like going off about how Trump voters they're all the ists. Like I started just spewing that out. And my husband was like, I have something to tell you. And it's like, oh my God. Like So it was just really, it's really interesting to look back and just think about how far I've come in a mindset shift for sure.
I find that really interesting, actually. So you were going out with your husband, obviously you were together, and he had this seemingly polar opposite political view as you. How did that work?
So he didn't actually.
Did he
have
not?
like
So
a
he
polar
did.
opposite.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood the situation.
No, you're fine. And a lot of people do. A lot of people assume he was conservative. So he was conservative before me, certainly.
Yep.
But growing up, like, and I've known him for 15 years. We've been together for years now. So we got together when I was fairly young. And I spent my whole 20s with him, you know.
Same with my one.
He was always, oh, that's fun. But he was always like left leaning. Like he was pro-choice. He was but he was just surface level kind of everything. You know, he always said like, I'm pro-choice because I'm a man and I don't get an opinion, because that was what was pushed into his head. Like, I'm going to have an opinion on this so that I'll just like support whatever you say. And that kind of thing. And he was like, we both grew up like really alternative, if you can't tell.
Please check out my website. I've got calendars, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, badges, everything you could possibly want.
So we've just had a little break, but you were saying about your partner didn't actually come from a completely different background to you.
Yeah. So like I said, he was fairly left alternative, like punk rock type of kid, anti-establishment. I mean, that's how we both were, you know, in high school and stuff like that. Like he was a skater kid. He was in bands. He, you know, was a big, you know, huge Green Day fan and stuff like that. And all sorts of other types of like anti-establishment music. And then when he voted for Trump, it was more along the lines of like just something different, something that wasn't like your average politician. He was intrigued. He had talked to a few of his, and they all felt the same way. The polls closed. He had ran out and voted. So it was kind of just a spur of the moment thing. And you know, when he was kind of explaining that to me, I just felt like I think I like said something like, you voted irresponsibly or something like that.
Brilliant.
And yeah, so it was just so silly. But yeah, it was actually like a really big point of strife within our relationship for just, I don't know, for me to come to terms with that. And then, like I said, once he started actually kind of delving into things, he started with more like philosophy, and he's delving into philosophy and why people think the way they do. And so he kind of came at it from a different like perspective, and he went from that into politics, where I was kind of already in politics, and then I went into philosophy. So we had an interesting like opposite reaction and what we were delving into. And then he quickly, like, he's anyway, and he knows exactly how to speak to me, obviously. Like, I mean, we've been together forever. And I think there's a lot of people who you know, share their stories with me and say like how them and their spouse got a divorce over the 2016 election. Like more people. Yeah. And so people always kind of commend me for like staying with him. And that's very strange to me. It's like, yeah, like it's very, very weird, because he says this too. He was like, even if you would have stayed more liberal and not necessarily like woke, he was like, I think we could have had some really interesting debates. I think it would have been an interesting dynamic in our relationship, kind of just giving that balance, which we still don't agree on every single thing. Like we'll still have kind of like spats and little like fun arguments and stuff like that. And it's interesting now, because like if we kind of push back on each other, it's just such a different dynamic. And then we're just like, oh, okay, like, and just drop it. Whereas it used to end up in like full blown arguments and fights. And because I instigated that, and I would just escalate, and it was just crazy. Like I remember getting in a huge argument about like the gay baker case, not the gay baker, but the baker making the gay cake. Yeah.
Do you think it escalated because you were arguing emotionally and he was trying to be logical though? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think there's always an escalation when people are emotional about it. I wouldn't even say like,
Mhm.
I would even go as far as to say I wasn't even really political in a strict sense. I was just like emotionally political, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm still working on learning so many things, and people will try to use that against me and say, "Oh, look, you're uneducated or you're ignorant." And I'm like, "No, it's a good thing to admit that you don't know everything." Like,
Yeah.
but before, that was my problem, is I thought I knew everything. I heard one idea and it sounded grand and I would just run with it. Whereas that's just not how things should be. You should probably challenge a bit more than that. So
I mean, that's not even
I
what,
think that's
like,
interesting.
I get called ignorant. That's not even what ignorant means. I mean, I might be wrong here, but I thought ignorant meant that you don't want to know any different. That's what I thought ignorant meant. Like, but maybe people are using it right on me, because I don't like when it comes to certain things like facts, you know, like men can't magically change into women. Of course, I want to know different if there is different evidence out there, but there isn't. So maybe I'm ignorant in the fact that I'm not going to budge on my opinion unless the world changes and suddenly you can change into something else, like biologically. But there's things like that that I don't think it's ignorant to just know the facts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's really important on social media, especially. People are trying so hard to prove that they're right that they will never admit that they could be wrong. And I think that's very flawed in and of itself. And it's just intriguing how like science has been so corrupted and distorted at this point to support people's pre-existing biases. And people will accuse me of that from time to time. But a lot of these issues I legitimately go into and look into things to make sure that, like, hey, am I missing something? Am I
Yeah.
missing a bigger part of this picture? Do I understand this fully? And, you know, sometimes when people kind of challenge me in that way or criticize me in that way, it just prompts me and motivates me. Okay, well, I need to learn more and I need to be more well-versed and be able to explain my view better. So I think it kind of gives me, instead of being offended, I use it as motivation to improve. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of being, because if you get upset every time somebody says you're wrong about something, then maybe you are wrong about something. I mean, I don't know. I don't get upset when people tell me I'm wrong about biological sex, because that's the thing I talk about the most. I don't get upset because I know I'm not wrong about it. So I'm just like, okay, you can believe whatever mad shit you want to believe. That's fine. I'm not against it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, is like people are they're so obstinate about it, and they're so like just rude. Like it's never like, you can say that I'm wrong all day, but unless you actually present good information and some backing on that, then it's literally just your opinion that I am wrong. It doesn't actually mean that I'm wrong. And like I said, like, you know, people just want to be right. They just want to prove, they want to like slam dunk on the other person, on the opposing viewpoint, as opposed to actually understanding and listening. And I got from all angles. Man, gender ideology has gotten crazy, like to the point, like the people who are promoting, and I used to like be on board with gender ideology, and I used to say the whole trans women are women thing without really thinking about it, without you know, really considering what that means. And now that we've seen it play out a lot more, because I mean, that was like, you know, years ago at this point, but it's like, no, we have to make this distinction. It's very important. It's not bigoted to acknowledge biological sex. And like, I've been talking about it more on TikTok and stuff, and there's people who are just, you know, every single video just leaving comment after comment after comment. It's like the same person. Just, it's like, there's nothing hateful about this. Why are you so offended about reality? And it's just, it's that twisting of the narrative, you know? And I don't know. It's very strange that people are so willing to throw away anything real for feelings, you know?
Yeah, I think it's actually frightening that people are, like you said, willing to throw away reality for their feelings. They're willing to throw away everything, their family, their friends. It's crazy. I think it is cult-like behaviour. And we're in a very severe era of it. And I was going to say, because you're on TikTok, you obviously have I think you've gone viral on TikTok, haven't you? You must have done, because I found you on the internet. So you've at least made waves. And look at me making waves. So you've gone quite far and wide on the internet. And would you say that you feel hopeful that more people are going to think about this and go on this sort of journey of looking inwards and who you are, and maybe focusing more on that rather than what your list of identity politics and markers are? Are you hopeful about that? Because I personally am. I think that the fact that someone like you can say what you're saying and reach as many people as you do means that we're actually in a position that's better than it was a few years ago when people couldn't say that.
I am hopeful. I also do try to, like, I try to kind of play the game to my advantage. Like there's a lot of things that, the censorship is really crazy, honestly. TikTok is extremely sensitive. Like, people think YouTube is bad. No. Like, TikTok is another world of reporting and censoring and trying to take videos down and stuff like that. But I am more hopeful in that there are so that leave comments or reach out to me in messages and say, hey, like, I'm super glad that you're speaking about this, because I don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to talk about this. Or, hey, I left the left and I'm just so scared to actually say what I think. So thank you for being that voice for me. And when I started talking about this kind of stuff, I never expected any type of reaction like that. I just went on TikTok because I felt like I needed a place to be able to say what I think. And I didn't feel comfortable sharing it on like my private social medias and like kind of making waves with a bunch of people that I knew. And I didn't really feel comfortable. Like, there's a lot of people in my life who just aren't political, who just don't care. They don't want to talk about it. They literally don't care. And then there's others who are more liberal. And I was just like, I just want to be able to say what I think and share that with other people and maybe connect with other people. And then my TikTok blew up and I was like, okay, like, it was actually very difficult and like very overwhelming. And the same thing happened when I went on YouTube. I made a YouTube in like August. And then I think it was like 2 weeks later that I posted my full like actual video of I Left the Left. And now I think I'm at like, I don't know, like 83,000 subs or something crazy like that. And I just can't wrap my brain around it most days. But there's just so many people and so much positive support. And, there's negative comments and stuff like that. But it's interesting because I'll sometimes like interact with people who are really, who really don't like me, and people will kind of ask me why, like, why would you do that? Why are you giving them the time of day? And it's like, well, somebody else could see that interaction. Like, there's people who are just never going to change their mind. They're never going to get out of their bubble. They're never going to challenge their own viewpoints. But if somebody else who is willing to possibly do that sees an interaction take place and sees that, I do try to come at this with as much compassion and as much respect as I possibly can. And typically it's usually like the other person who just resorts to name calling and insulting and degradation and all of that. And I kind of want that to be highlighted a little bit more, like, hey, I'm really trying to be respectful, whereas this other person is just not showing me any type of respect. And that's just the dynamics of it currently. But I do think we're going to get into a better place. And I don't know how it is over in the UK. I have there's a couple of YouTubers who do like the street interview over in the UK. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this is exactly like here. Like and I do apologize. I don't know much about your guys' like actual politics, just because like there's a lot in the world to focus on. I gotta focus on home, but man, like, just the level of hatred that permeates because of all of this, just because of somebody wanting to have a conversation. It's very alarming to me.
Yeah, it is. Like, I relate to you a lot, because I've come to YouTube because I want to say things, and I hope that there's other people that want to talk about these things too, and people that feel the same way. So like there is a yearning to connect in that way, especially since I got cancelled as well. But I made the mistake of talking about all this stuff on my personal profiles, and then everybody turned against me, and then I just went, oh fuck it, I'll just talk to the world then, see if there's people in the world that will be nice to me. But in terms of the hatred, it is very real. And I grew up seeing things like "Kill Tory scum" written on bus stops, and I never batted an eyelid at that. That was just normal. Now I think about it and I think, well, why are we accepting a narrative that says kill people who think differently to me, and calling them Tory and calling them scum, because that's the name for Conservatives. We call them Tories. And I've been calling them Tories for years. And then I didn't realise that was a derogative term for them. And it basically means thieves. And so I didn't even know. So I've been calling them Tories, but they're actually Conservative. And the idea that you would openly express that level of hatred, like murderous hatred, towards people who just think differently to you. And a lot of these people on the right, or even in the middle, or just anywhere not on the left, they don't want different things to anybody on the left. They just have a different idea of how to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I do, I think, traditionally liberals and conservatives are not that far apart. They just have differing solutions to the same problem. But at this point, like, there's no liberals left that are vocal, at least. And anybody who does claim to be liberal but isn't with the far left ideology, they are just labeled a far right, extremist. And it's just insane to me. And it's always like, I've been called like a Christo-fascist, which is a fun new term. And it's just like, I feel like I should that to apply, but surprisingly I am not. Like, and there's just this idea that, which I used to play into it too, like a lot of conservatives are fairly religious and all of that, but not everybody is. A lot of people are constitutional conservatives. A lot of people just believe in family values and rule of law, small government, and all of that. Yep. It's really interesting that, and I do generalize sometimes, obviously, like when I'm talking about the left, I do try to say like people on the left to not look at it as like a monolith where everybody obviously believes the exact same thing. Because I do think people differ slightly, but the loudest voices are leading the pack. And that's the biggest problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the what they call the silent majority are the most damaging in this, because I think the loudest voices are not the most popular ones, to be honest. And that obviously, I think that goes for either side, if you want to think of it as sides. And I know a lot of people don't like calling it the left and the right, and a lot of people think that's not really relevant anymore. But I struggle with finding other ways to articulate myself when I'm talking about it. So shorthand, I say the left and the right, but I obviously know that there are nuances to that. And I just think there's a lot of vocal minority. Like historically, I've always thought of the right as being a censorious ones, and now I'm wondering, when the right was censorious, when they were doing what the extreme left is doing now, maybe it was for them a vocal minority, and a majority of people on the right were like, that's a bit, I wouldn't go that far. Do you know what I mean? But they just didn't speak up. I totally understand the Wi-Fi issues, because I don't know if you've listened to a lot of me on YouTube, but I used to live in a van for like 7 years, and we used our hotspot for everything. But that's why I didn't do things like this sooner, because internet would have been a nightmare.
Yeah, I live out in the middle of like the boonies, so it can be frustrating sometimes.
I was going to ask you if you think the hatred towards the right is escalating, and do you see it de-escalating at any point?
I see it escalating. it's interesting. I don't fix in my day-to-day like life outside of like me and my husband. I just don't. It just doesn't really come up for me, everybody has their beliefs, you're all entitled to them, whatever. But when it comes to online, like, I mean, I like I said, I try to be fairly respectful, and I try to be actually as nice as I can. I probably should just stop caring about that so much, but because sometimes it can be difficult to get my point across. But people will still smear me and say I'm so horrible and hateful and I'm bigoted and I'm this and I'm that and I'm transphobic and homophobic. And it's so surreal being on the other side of it, and I actually like went and I messaged somebody that I used to talk to a lot, and he was more conservative, and I used to talk to him at my old job. We both worked at the same place. We were friends, and I messaged him and I apologized to him for ever treating him poorly, or ever like pushing a boundary in regards to, like, he was a very religious person. And I just said, hey man, I'm so sorry if I ever like disrespected you or made you feel any type of way about that, because it just wasn't right of me to do that. And he's just so sweet. He was just like, oh, no worries. Like, you were good. You were always a good friend. You were always a good person to talk to. You were very passionate. And I appreciated it. And I was just like, wow, like it really is like, it's so crazy to me, because even if you said something hurtful to somebody who was like a staunch leftist, and you said, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, they wouldn't care. They would not care if you apologize. No, there's no forgiveness, no mercy, no thinking, and that's also a big indicator of like this cancel culture that has gotten out of hand, in my opinion, because like they'll go and dig up things from 10, 15, 20 years ago for some people. And it's like they say, oh, it doesn't matter what time it happened in. It just matters that it happened. It's like, no, it does. That does make a really big impact on how people operated within the world and how they interacted with one another, is what was socially acceptable at that given time period, Yeah. And it's almost like, they really do think like nobody is capable of any type of growth. No one's ever capable of changing their mind about anything, or, and that's why a lot of people, I'm sure, I don't know if you get this, I have to believe that you do, but anybody who comes across me will just automatically be like, you were never a leftist. You were never on the left. You were always conservative. You were always on the right. You're just a liar. You're grifting.
Yeah, I've heard all of that. And I've even had it from people that knew me. People that knew us for like 10 years and then cancelled me, and they publicly stated that I've never been a leftist, and that I've always been a fascist, apparently. And I've just chosen now to go public with my fascism because it's popular and I can cash in on it.
That's fun.
So it's just disgusting, and it's dishonest, and I hope that people see through it. I always hope that people that know us see people saying things like that about us and be like, yeah, but I know Birdie and she's nice and she believes all these things that I believe in. But you know what? A little bit of me doesn't think people are doing that. I don't think people are. And I have to say, I'm not that great with the forgiveness thing. Like, I think it's detrimental to be in a society where forgiveness is frowned upon, and that we're not going to offer forgiveness to anybody for, like you said, digging up things from 20 years ago. You can be an entirely different person in 20 days time, let alone 20 years. So, but I personally have to admit that I'm not great on the forgiveness thing, because everybody who cancelled me, never going to forgive them. Or I should say tried to cancel, because you only get cancelled as far as you allow people to. And
what did you get canceled for? Because I was curious. I've heard you say it in a few videos, and I was like, what happened?
I don't think I got cancelled for anything. I think the people who went after us had a personal vendetta. I think, and this is going to sound petty of me to say, but I think they were jealous, and I think that's what it comes down to. And they used me saying that men are not women as a weapon to kill us off with, like, get us. And that has been really weaponized. But from the start, when I got cancelled, and my listeners are going to be sick of hearing this, but from the start, it's always been about character assassination. And I found out some of these people that cancelled me and went after me and said that I'm a fascist and all these things, they didn't just say, we don't agree with her views. They said that I beat them up. They said I've been stalking them. They said I've been making them suicidal. And these were people I knew for years. I found out, like about a year ago, that some of these people have been saying weird shit about me for a long time. Like one of them in particular has been telling people that I abused my partner for 8 years and nobody told me. So everybody who's been silent about the things that have been said about me, and then everybody who watched us be attacked in this way, I don't forgive them. I don't forgive anybody. You know,
I can't blame you for that. That's a different level. That's extremely concerning. And
it's extremely hateful. It's very hateful behavior. And this is why I'm not convinced that it has anything to do with me saying that men are not women. And I don't even call it my views, because that's just a fact. And it's a fact that we all agreed on 5 minutes ago. So
yeah, well, you know what I find interesting is it's always people who, if you don't have a good rebuttal for an argument, you attack the person, you discredit them, you ruin their credibility, you ruin their reputation, so that nobody's willing to listen to what they are saying. And, you know, that's a huge problem, in that you're not actually contesting the argument when you do that. You are just going after the whoever's saying it, and that silences a lot of people for sure. But like you said, like I made a few videos, you know, just saying like there's only male and female. There's no other sex. There's no other third type of gamete, you know. Oh, did you freeze? Okay, cool.
No, you're fine.
But you know,
good.
And I kept saying, show me. Yeah. Okay. I kept saying like, show me the third sex. Because, you know, there's like people try to be in that regard. There's abnormalities. There's things that lie outside of the standard deviation. There's still only male and female, and for some reason that somehow equates to transphobia, which is really interesting, because then that means you're conflating sex and gender, which have always been separate. Like it's this like snowball effect of all of these thoughts and ideas and beliefs that are just colliding at this point and like crumbling beneath them, and they have no way of substantiating anything, so they just have to like, you're just transphobic, you're just hateful. Like it's really strange.
And you know what, I use the word hateful and I mean it. I think these people, the people that engage in these specific behaviors, no matter where they are politically, are hateful people. And I think that it's such a shame that they're not able to recognize that they have a lot of work to do on the inside, because a lot of these people talk a lot of bollocks about being a good person and being authentic, and you know, a lot of them will claim that they meditate and shit like that. I don't meditate, I just ain't got the patience for it. But there's a lot of self-reflection that goes on, especially when you get cancelled and stuff. Like I learned a lot about myself, but not just myself, about how other people operate. And then I learned loads of stuff I never knew before. Like I read Gulag Archipelago because Jordan Peterson's always banging on about it. So I thought, all right, I'll give that a read. That took me ages. I thought I was going to read it. I listened to it actually, but I thought I was going to listen to that in a week. No, it took me a month. It's such a heavy book to go through. But what I learned from it is that this behavior is human. Like this is actually human behavior. This is the reason we repeat history, is because this is how humans are. This is what we're compelled to be like. And people need to be encouraged to look at themselves in that way. And people don't want to. People don't want to think of themselves as animals that have like an intrinsic set of behaviors that they could, but you're not necessarily built to behave in a certain way all the time, but you could go down avenues that predetermine what your behaviors are going to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're very tribalistic You know, I mean, that's what has like, that's what used to save humans is coming together and being in a tribe and defending one another and making sure that there's no invaders or outsiders coming. You know what I mean? But instead of like being more, I guess, like positively tribalistic in that, like, you know, developing your community and being a part of your community, like we don't have communities anymore. Even like in small towns, there's a whole lot of people who are outliers and who don't participate within the community. So they feel like they're all alone. And when you don't have community, when you are isolated because we're all interacting online through like computer mediated communication and all of that, well, what else do you have? You have politics. So now people have turned their away from all of these things that, and religion is a really big one too. Like I'm not even religious, and I can acknowledge that people turning away from it has taken away community from people.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, the religion has gone out in my lifetime. I mean, I think people became, like in England in particular, I don't know if it's the same in America, but in England, religion is so unpopular compared to what it was maybe in the 50s, that it doesn't surprise me that people are replacing it with politics, and also science is becoming a form of religion as well. I didn't think of that myself. I heard it on a Zuby interview a little while ago. I don't know who said it, but I can't claim that I came up with that thought, but I think it resonated with me, that I think that is how people are treating it.
Mm-hmm. And because science isn't supposed to be like, there are elements of certain, you know, like human development. That is a very, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it, but that's fairly unchanging. Like the way a human being develops within the womb and pregnancy and all of that, that's very well established at this point. But there are a lot of different types of science, especially the social sciences. Like you cannot sit there and say that every survey that comes out, like a study based on a survey of questionnaires that people take, is this concrete form of evidence. No, we have to always take it with a grain of salt. We have to look at the limitations of the study. We have to look at the size of the study in and of itself, and how long of a period it took place over. And people they just throw all that out the window, and they say, "Oh, it supports my point of view, so I'm gonna go with it." And I actually just finished The End of Gender by Dr. Deborah Soh. Very good. Yeah, very good. I listened to that one on Audible. But she kind of goes over that, where a lot of research within like just sexology research has been corrupted to such a point by people and activists, like gatekeeping and shooting studies down if they don't like them, and people going in to try to find the results that they're expecting, you know, the results that they want. And that is not science. That is activism. You know, it's completely corrupted. And I think it's just, you know, like you said, we've replaced all of these things like religion and these really strong foundational beliefs. We've just replaced it with politics. And I don't care what your political beliefs are. It doesn't make you a good person. Whatever you believe in, that doesn't make you a virtuous person who is actually promoting good ideas and spreading love and kindness throughout the world. Because if all of your, you know, if that's all based on hatred of the other side, then you're not this grand, great, amazing human being who should be respected at every turn. Like, no, respect is earned. I'm not going to just, you know, I might be cordial to you, I might be courteous to you, but I'm not just gonna, yes, I respect you and I'll let you say whatever you want to me and that's fine. Like, no, like we have to operate from that kind of give and take place. And if you show me respect, I'm going to show you respect. And I do try to kind of take the higher road a lot of times and just be like, I'll just still be nice to you, even though you're being absolutely horrible to me, to just kind of like, I think it like pisses people off even more actually when they don't get the response. So it's just like, man,
I think I've always been polite on the internet, and I think I still am. I think I'm still polite on social media, but I am a lot less tolerant of people's shit than I was a few years ago. And as time goes on, I just start to spot it a lot sooner, and I'm just a lot quicker to choose not to respond or to even block. I even block people. I just go, do you know what? It's not going to be worth my time. And I understand the argument that there are people watching and maybe you can persuade people through having a debate. And I think that's legitimate. But I also feel a little bit like I put in my years doing that and I'm done with it. I'm just going to say what I think. And if somebody has a decent rebuttal, we can talk it out. But if you're just going to come in to tell me that I'm an ignorant fascist or whatever, then I ain't bothered.
Yeah. And I think like, this has really taught me just being online in general and just getting so much, like so many eyes looking at me and commenting and all of that. It's really helped me learn how to deal with extremely harsh criticism in a much more productive way, because I was really bad at that. And I was,
me too.
I was a bit like, and like, I have really bad anxiety. So sometimes it's really difficult for me to put certain views out there. Cause like, it's like, I know before I even press like publish, I know exactly what the response is going to be. I know how people are going to see it. I know how people are going to react. And it's just very interesting to me that I can predict all of that. And then like it manifests. But yeah, just being able to like kind of take a step back and go, this person isn't worth my time. Every once in a while, there'll be somebody who pops up, because I get these like little groups of people who will just hate watch all of my content and then just spam it. And it's very weird. Like if I can watch a video I don't agree with and then just keep scrolling. And even if I think they're ignorant or stupid or whatever, like I never comment, I never say anything. I never, and I certainly wouldn't like just harass people.
Yeah.
It's a very strange mindset.
Do you think they actually are listening to you though? Because I'm never convinced that people who hate watch me on social media or leave nasty comments are actually paying attention to what I say. I think they're just waiting for a moment where they can intentionally misinterpret me in some sort of way. Like a lot of people have a go at me. Not a lot of people, that's a lie. A few people have had a go at me on my YouTube video, but they've always, I can tell straight away they've not watched it. Does that make sense? So I don't worry about what they're going to say if they're not going to give my view the time of day, because I just think they're not coming at this, like people say, good faith argument. You're not coming at this with the intention. And I don't like predicting people's intentions because you can't, but I can see and I can sense that you're not coming here for a debate on whether or not men can actually magically turn into women or whatever it is we're talking about. That's always the first one that comes to my head because it's just so in our faces every day, right? But and that one's the one that blows my mind the most as well, because these people, a lot of these people, whether they're men or women, because women do it too, which is something not a lot of people want to talk about, but there are a lot of women that are all for this. And I think it's for slightly different reasons for men. But I still can't get my head around why you can look me dead in the eyes and tell me that you don't know what a woman is when you came out of one. It's weird.
Well, it's very disingenuous. It's like you're saying, so when I used to say that kind of thing, I would say, and that's where I always operate, is I operate thinking back to who I used to be and the things I used to say. And I try to like put myself back in the mindset. And that's why, I think that's why I really piss some people off, because you know what I mean? But when I used to say things like trans women are women, I didn't think about it. I just thought about it as this is a nice way to treat people with respect. And
you didn't actually mean that they are actually biological women. You just meant we just need to be nice. We just need to, why are you picking up? Why are you going up to that person and just saying they're not women? That's not nice. And that's what I totally understand. And I think there's a benefit to coming from that point of view.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting because trans people in general, transsexuals, as they call themselves, they wanted to assimilate essentially and be viewed as I'm registering as a man, or I'm registering to other people as a woman. And, I think those people have a lot of respect for sex segregated spaces, especially, and they acknowledge that I'm a little bit different. I need to be respectful of the other people in here. And it's very frustrating to me. It's like somebody like, I don't know, like Blair White or like Rose of Dawn or something like that. Those type of people, like they register as she to me. So I'm going to call you she. And it's actually like, feels like it's going out of my way to call somebody like Blair White he. But at the same time, like she acknowledges her biological reality. She doesn't shy away from that. And it's the same with like Buck Angel and like, you know what I mean? Like all these people who are very well known and are very respectful. And I feel for them and I want to treat them with respect, certainly. But it's just so weird that like somebody like, you know, the it's ma'am, like meme person. It's like, that's a man.
Terrible.
Like, I can't look at that person and think it doesn't matter how much you demand that I do. My brain does not do that. Like, it's not going to happen. And I don't know.
I feel a certain way about the pronouns. Like, I haven't got a problem with Blair White or Buck Angel or Rose of Dawn or any of these people. I ain't got a problem with them because I've got a lot of time for people that are trying to navigate the truth in a world where the truth is heresy. So I've got a lot of time for it. But like, I do have an issue with the pronouns and that I just can't bring myself to do the preferred pronouns thing at this point where it feels like I don't want to be forced or compelled or coerced to do it. I don't want to be manipulated to do it. Maybe 10 years ago, I might have done it. In fact, I did do it years ago because I didn't see it as going out of my way for my friends. But it feels political. It feels like there's a reason for me to take a stand on it. But I will talk to these people. I'm actually talking to Buck Angel soon, so I'm looking forward to that. And I will talk to Buck about the pronoun thing and how does that affect everybody, really? Because it does at this point. It didn't before.
And I will not be compelled and I will not cave to demands of somebody else. To me, like I said, if you register to me, if my brain looks at you and just thinks, you know, that's kind of different. You want
to. That's different.
Yeah,
like
it's also like respect and all of that.
So like, but I at the same time as I don't want to do it for my I feel a certain way about it. I don't feel a certain way about somebody who chooses to do it either. I think if you want to do it, do it. What I don't like is you telling other people they have to. Not that you personally are doing that, but you know, do you know what I mean? So I feel like it comes down to a choice. And I think there are people like Blair White and Buck Angel who sort of get it, that it's a choice. I don't know if they'd be offended. I don't know if they would be offended, but that's kind of their thing. If you're offended, that's your offense, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing to take into account as well is, man, the pronoun thing is a weird one too, because I've been, you know, and I've been back and forth on it in my own head, like, and I just always come back to like, if you are actually trans and you actually have gender dysphoria, then, you know, and you know who you are and you understand the bio, you know, like I'm just much more respecting of that and that position. Yeah. And, you know, I don't have any problem with how people live their life. If you want to live your life in a certain way, you go ahead and do it. But at the same time, you don't get access to all of my spaces just because you say, like, that's a big difference too, is like, these people have taken action in changing a lot of different aspects about themselves to assimilate the best that they possibly can, you know? And I just view it in such a different way than somebody who just wears a dress and a wig and then prances on in and says, you have to accept me. And I don't know, I find myself kind of struggling sometimes with it because like, I go like, I don't know if you've ever been on like the Reddit pages of like the MTF or whatever, but man, like some of those posts in there are so scary to me. Like I've seen posts of like, and I've seen posts of like males who are going into women's restrooms and then laughing when they scare women. It's like, why is that funny to you? Wouldn't you be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I'll get right out of here. Like, I don't want to scare you. But instead it's, I need these women to cave to my demands of letting me enter their spaces. It's like, no, I refuse to do that. You do not get access if that's how you view it. You know what I mean?
And I think that's where a hard line has to be drawn, to be honest. And it's unfortunate that there will be people who slip through the cracks, who, like, other people might feel they deserve to be in a woman's space, like Blair White. But when it comes down to it, I would personally rather say no men in these women's spaces at all, to prevent the dangerous ones from being in there. And that means that a few men will feel put out who maybe are identifying as transsexual but are not dangerous. But I'd rather protect the women and the girls and the children than worry about what how a man's going to feel. Or, it's just, there are hard lines being drawn. But unfortunately, if these trans rights activists hadn't have pushed this so far and been so unreasonable in their demand, we wouldn't have to draw these hard lines. Because 10, 20 years ago, when in England there were only 5,000 transsexuals in the whole country, people didn't think it would affect them at all, and it didn't 20 years ago. It wasn't necessarily anything that affected you on your daily life. Now every other person identifies as some sort of queer and has a queer kid. It's just bizarre. And it's now that it's got this far, there has to be hard lines drawn. There just has to be.
I agree. And it's very unfortunate for the people who are just trying to live their lives. They're not trying to be these crazy activists. They're not trying to make all these big waves. They're just trying to just get along and go along and all of that. And I think, like, we have a mental health problem, first and foremost.
Definitely. This is what it's rooted in.
Yeah. And, it's frustrating to me because it's like, instead of people acknowledging that, okay, let's advocate for a third option, or let's, like with the bathroom thing, let's just advocate for one gender neutral, like, stalled bathroom, which many places already have. Like, I don't even know why that's such a crazy concept to some of these activists. Like, I've worked I actually worked in a place where I had to, we had to constantly pull this man who dressed as a woman out of the women's bathroom. And we had to tell him, and I mean, this was like years ago at this point, and we had to always tell him, like, you're not allowed in here. And he would argue and argue and argue, and we would just have to go back to show us your ID. And it would obviously had a big old M on it. Okay, you don't belong in here. You need to use the single stalled bathrooms that we actually have here. It's like women feel unsafe. And at the same time, it's like, I understand. I also think, like, a third option is really important, because there are trans women who look very, very much like women, and they might not be safe in the male restroom. You know what I mean? Like, they might not be safe around other men who.
Yeah, I would say some people are, there are people that are very convincing, and they've had, like, a lot of cosmetic shit done to them. There's also, like, detransitioners as well that are too far gone. So there's a lot of women detransitioners that look manly because they've got the stubble, they can never get rid of that, they've got the deep voice. So the third option is something I would settle on having, as long as the male and female options are still there, and that goes for toilets, changing rooms, whatever it is. As long as the female option is retained as a female only space, I think a third option is a great compromise.
Yeah.
But the trans rights activists don't want that, because it ain't about compromise to them. It ain't about that. They can screech all they want that we're not being reasonable, but it's them that's not being reasonable.
Exactly. And it's why, like you said, it's why these hard lines have to be drawn in the first place. Is because it's gotten so out of hand. Back in the day, it was just kind of like case by case basis. We got to take it at a case by case basis. If it causes problems, it'll be addressed. But now you have, like, there have been so many instances of males attacking and assaulting women within bathrooms, within locker rooms, exposing themselves, in prison, impregnating them. And you know what I always get met with? I always get met with, well, how many? I'm sorry. What?
I got met with that
Like-
the other day. Somebody was saying it's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. Why are you always picking the anomaly? And I said, one man going to one female prison is too many for me. It's too
Yeah.
many.
Well, and in any other context, any type of assault like that, they would acknowledge it. One is too many. But for some reason, we have to meet a magical threshold for it to register as important to you, for victims to matter to you. And that's what really gets me. And really, like, it's a very misogynistic, it's the same thing as like, what was she wearing? It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. And you know, it's frustrating to me because I have a lot of compassion for individuals, right? But individuals aren't what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a big group of people who are pushing this, and it's not just anyone within the LGBT community or anything like that. It's all these people who also want to appear as allies, and they want to appear as these good people.
I've got a big problem with the ideology and the activists for the ideology, the cultists, whatever you want to call them, the religious extremists is what they are. I've got a problem with them. I don't really have an issue with individuals. I take that as a person by person basis, to be honest.
And you know what's interesting about that is people on the left don't look at it the same way. Like, they don't look at us as individuals. They look at us as a part of a group that they hate. So by
the far right,
they hate us. And that's such an interesting dynamic of most conservatives or most people who just aren't on the woke left, really. I won't even put it as conservative. Like, there's some independents and libertarians and all kinds of other people too. But most people who are more right-leaning or whatever, they view people on the left as like individuals, part of this group, pushing a group ideology, pushing a group mindset. But man, everyone within that group mindset just groups everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that hatred is just spread evenly. Doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do even. And it seems like words mean more than actions at this point, because they will overlook bad actions of people on their side and just focus on the words of the other side.
Yeah, I've been in contact with that. Like, there was a Liberal Democrat Party politician on Twitter berating me for not respecting the preferred pronouns of a convicted paedophile that's in prison. I was like, well, that's a bit much. And one of the arguments was, it doesn't matter what crime's been committed. This person is trans. You've got to respect their pronouns. You're being transphobic. And I was like, we're talking about a convicted, like a really bad convicted paedophile. And it's not even a question of whether or not he's a paedophile. He went to prison for like 30 offences. This is a really bad person. And it's like, this is an actual bad person, but you're calling me a bad person because I want it. But why does it even matter? The guy's in prison. None of us even know him. Why does it matter? Do I respect him or not?
The most disgusting part is that they're even worried about his feelings. I'm not worried about that person's. I don't give a shit. Like,
and I was about to come to that. It's that being offended and upset and activism on behalf of other people as well. It's like, why don't you just worry about yourself? Just worry. But maybe some people are worrying way too much about themselves as well. Maybe that's the problem. But I agree with you with the mental health crisis as well. Is it similar in America as it is here? Here we've got obviously universal health care. The NHS is what we've got here. So everybody has access to healthcare, but the ability to access mental health services has dramatically diminished, I would say, in my lifetime. And the appropriate mental health care is diminished as well. Like, the appropriate care for children or for mentally ill young teenagers, vulnerable adults, it's just gone out the window, and I don't know where it is. I don't know why people can't access it. And I feel like things like, this is me being a little bit conspiratorial, but things like labeling everybody as trans is a way of copying out of having to address their actual issues. Plus you can cash in on it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've listened to dozens and dozens of detransitioner stories specifically, and the commonality amongst all of them are mental health comorbidities. And there's a lot in, and I've dealt with my fair share of like mental health issues in the past, and I've been misdiagnosed as a teenager.
I have
And
too.
yeah. And so it's like, we know firsthand how easy it is for somebody to just say, oh, yep, you have this, and send you on your way and prescribe some meds, and think that they slapped a Band-Aid on your issues, when really like you're just in all this emotional turmoil and pain, and you don't know how to get out of it, and nobody's helping you get out of it. And that's the biggest problem I see with all of this, is that these people, this is not a way out. This is you're going to ruin people's lives, and you are actively ruining children's lives by allowing them to make permanent alterations to their body, and surgeries and hormones, and ruining their fertility. That has an enormous mental impact that we cannot even perceive at the moment, because there's so many people who
I find it overwhelming when I listen to detransitioners or I read their thread. I'm overwhelmed at the idea that maybe at 20 or 21 years old, you have to reckon with the fact that not only are you now sterilized, but you can't reverse it. And you've also, especially like the women as well, I find that overwhelming, with you've now got a beard, your voice is deeper and things like that. I relate to that a bit because I've got PCOS. So I've had like a moustache since I was about 11. But wax that shit off. So I can deal with it. But, it's very different. Like a lot of women with PCOS do get like a full beard and shit like that. And they have to go through an incredible amount of psychological turmoil to accept themselves and overcome it. So you have a young individual, male or female. I think it's hard on both the boys and the girls, and I think there's more young men are going to start coming out as detransitions soon. And I think you have a young person who is already struggling to accept themselves, which is why they were easily led into transitioning in the first place. And now they have to relearn to accept themselves while wishing they had just accepted themselves in the first place, most likely. I just find it overwhelming. It's too much. And I really genuinely feel for detransitioners. I really do. I think they've been mugged off, and then on top of it, they're being attacked and treated poorly afterwards as well, and abandoned medically. And this is such a big disgrace. It's a stain on our society. And when we look back in history, it's going to be seen as a child abuse scandal. It really is. And I can't believe that people dismiss this, that people just don't care. Again, I'm not going to forgive that.
No. And what's frustrating is like, I try to educate myself as much as I possibly can. And I've gone and I've watched like the surgeries that are involved.
Oh, I don't know if I could.
It's really brutal. They're on YouTube. But I watched it and I cringed the whole time, just thinking like we're experimenting on people. These are cruel and crass experiments, and doctors thinking that they can pull off, you know what I mean? Like it's real reminiscent of certain aspects of history where doctors experimented on people, you know what I mean? Like, and it's very worrying. And the amount of people who don't think about it, and who just go along to get along, and aren't speaking up for these kids. And it's just like, it's frustrating to me, because even when I try to like, look, I have experiences of being a teenager and having so much emotional turmoil and not having anyone to turn to and feeling so lost. But anytime you kind of try to like say, look, I can relate to this on a certain level, and I can share my experience with you and how these people might be better helped, it's just always like, why are you making this about yourself? It's like, no, like I'm trying to like get it through to you that like drugs and surgery isn't going to fix what's going on up here. Like,
I got told early days, you're not trans, so you don't understand. You'll never understand because you're cisgendered, and you're not allowed to talk on this subject because you're not trans. And you know, only people with gender dysphoria understand. And the more I looked into it, the more I realised everybody at some point is likely to experience some form of body dysmorphia or dysphoria of some sort. You're especially prone to something like that during your teenage years when your body is changing. So how dare these people? Oh, I'm getting all self-righteous now. How dare you? How dare these people say that we're not allowed to talk about it because we don't get it? That's ridiculous, because a majority of us have been through some sort of mild to severe, all the way to downright dangerous discomfort with our bodies.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's frustrating? Like when I was like 10 and I hit puberty and my body was changing, I wore boys' clothes for like an entire year.
I did for about 5
If
years.
anyone bought me. Yeah. And I would like get mad if anybody bought me like girls' clothes. I would say no, like I would just want to wear baggy sweatshirts and jeans. And then, you know, as soon as like that year basically was over, I just went right back to like, I never thought I was a boy. I just didn't like what was happening. It was, you know, like puberty hit me super early and it was very apparent, and I just didn't like what was going on. It took me a long time to kind of come to terms with that. And then like, you know, I'm just kind of one of those people, like there's some days where like I like to get dressed up and I like to wear makeup. And then there's other days where I like to wear a backwards hat and t-shirts, and I kind of just live in t-shirts anyway. I'm not super like overly feminine or anything like that. So it frustrates me because now we live in this weird world of like I think a big creator like stitched one of my videos and put it on his YouTube, and people were like calling me a lesbian because I had a backwards hat on. And I'm like, why does that mean I'm a lesbian? Like, it's such a weird, and like what you brought up about women with like PCOS and having facial hair and stuff. It's like, okay, so now these women have had a hard enough time getting people to accept that they're female. And now you're going to like basically lump all of this other stuff. They're going to like be treated as if they were trans, you know?
I've been told that I'm trans because I had PCOS. Yeah, I've been told that. And I've been told that I'm just being a coward to not admit that I'm trans and shit like that. And I think it's very disrespectful and insulting, like deeply insulting to women with PCOS when these women take testosterone, they do all this shit to their bodies, and then they're like, oh, you know, it's hard being an unconventional man and all this shit. And it's like, how do you think it feels for a woman with a beard? Like, how do you think that actually feels?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's even more insulting when men with beards prance around saying they're women. And it's like, oh, well, I'm just changing the bandwidth of what it is to be a woman. And it's like, no, you're not. You're a man. And women with beards that have got things wrong with them are going to be very upset that you're appropriating them.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because like, I mean, most women have like a little bit of like something going on, right? You know, like tons of women, especially when they get older, your hair gets darker, you know what I mean? Completely normal. And most women just, they take care of it and like, they don't really think about it. But now we live in this world where like, I almost feel like women are going to get really hypersensitive about that as well. Like, oh man, if I look like I even have like a little shadow, people are going to think I'm actually a man masquerading as, you know what I mean? And it's just like, that's so alarming to me. And I really feel like gender ideology in and of itself is solidifying all of these gender stereotypes. I think there's actually a lot of homophobia involved in that.
Totally
like,
agree.
Men, yeah, especially like boys, like young boys who might think that they're gay. Instead of just embracing that they might be a little bit more of an effeminate man, or they might be gay, they're now thinking that they're women because they're attracted to men and they like girly things.
It's not even just that. It's that society, like not society as a whole, but this ideology specifically is teaching younger people that it's preferable to be trans than it is to be homosexual, like gay or lesbian or bisexual. It's better to be trans because you're actually teaching people that it's wrong to be gay. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a lot of, what country is it? I can't remember what country it is in the Middle East that being gay is basically punishable by death. But they'll pay for you to transition because if you look like a woman, then it's all good. And that's so alarming.
There's a few
Yeah.
countries that do that, and I've had some friends that did cancel me who, before they cancelled me when we were friends, they were saying, oh, we went to this country and they were so progressive because, you know, that everyone, all the, like, there's loads of trans and all of this. And I remember I didn't say anything to them, but afterwards I said to my partner, the only reason there's trans people in that country is because you get thrown off a building if you're gay. You know, like you get killed if you're gay. So it's not even just a prison sentence, it's a death sentence. And anybody would choose surgery over death. I think most people would. So it's not, it's just
sad
so
too,
ignorant.
because and it's sad too because people just want to also be with the person that they love as well. Like they want to be able to be with somebody at least, and not be forced to live a life of either having, you know, if it's a gay man and he has to be with a woman, like he's going to be miserable, you know. And the lack of, like, progressives have so much disdain with religion in regards to Christianity, but not with other types of religions. They have such
the other
disdain
religions are fine.
And it's very, like, just culturally driven, and it's really weird. I've had this argument as a leftist with my husband before in the past, and, you know, he kept saying, well, why is it okay for them but not for us? Why is it okay there but not here? Why is it just a cultural difference when we're talking about this other place? But it's not, like, even though we live in, like, you know, the US is a country that's just full of different types of cultures and stuff like that. But there's no cultural differences. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very weird way of, like, compartmentalizing and justifying anything that goes against your stance. Really, it's very strange. Which, like, I don't know how homogenous is, like, the UK. I know it's, like, obviously much smaller and all of that, but do people pretty much all operate the same way, I guess?
I think there was a time that we could have said that's true, maybe 50 or 60 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that. But I think in my lifetime that it has divided a bit. And I think that culturally, that's because we've got a lot more different people living in the UK now, because we're a little bit of a melting pot. And I think that has changed things. And people are scared to talk about that because it's seen as racist to talk about how immigration and things like that change your culture. But it does. And instead of bringing everyone together, it's divided everyone, because people have their own tradition, their own language, their own way of being. And then you've got, you know, English people with their own way of being and their own traditions and their own politics and things like that. But it is that groupthink again. Like, people, like, there's certain people on the left that think that everybody who's not from here, or everybody who doesn't look like us, thinks like them, like they're just like a lefty. And they don't realize that a lot of people, like, especially like immigrant families from certain parts of the world, from certain countries, are going to be conservative. They're not going to agree with you. So there's that sort of division, but it's on many levels as well. And don't forget as well, in England, we've got Wales and Scotland, and they see themselves as their own kind of country as well. So there is division. And I think culturally, everybody's kind of on eggshells because they don't want to say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing. And especially talking about things like this, you do get branded a racist. You just do. And I don't think that's fair. That's something I've looked at since I got cancelled. I've changed my mind on. I'm like, well, why can't people talk about this? Why can't people talk about how it's changed their town or the things around them and how they feel about it? It's not hateful to talk about it. It's hateful to say, oh, get those fucking people out of here. That is hateful. But to say this has changed things and it makes me feel a certain way, that is not hateful.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a big thing that people cannot understand here. Like, right now, we have so many people flooding into our country, and it's so frustrating that people just can't understand, like, not all of those people are good people. That's why we vet immigrants. That's why we make sure that they should be here. That's why we check backgrounds. And that's why it's a long process, and it takes a lot of money, because you have to make sure that you're supposed to be here. But instead, we're letting people just stream in and you know, obviously there are some sad cases within that, right? But there's a whole lot of criminals. There's a whole lot of gang members. There's a whole lot of people who want to do really bad things and are doing really bad things. And instead of acknowledging that and being like, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't let like violent men and drug dealers and stuff, you know, just freely walk in with no repercussions whatsoever. They just think of every single person. It's the same way that a lot of like leftists will think of poor people. They think of people who are different or are minorities or whatever as like lesser than, to an extent of they see them as these like poor victims all of the time.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating to me, actually. It's like, you know, growing up in poverty, there's a lot of people who are trying really hard to get out of it for sure. But there's a lot of people who are only there because of bad decision-making skills, because they lack any motivation, because they're not willing to work hard. They're not willing to get a job, and they get paid to do so by the government.
I've seen all of that. I've seen it all in my surroundings as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, man, I'm really glad we have this conversation. I feel like we can relate in a lot of different ways. But it's very frustrating. It's like to act as if every single person is just a victim of all of their circumstances all of the time, and not like, that's a huge lack of just personal responsibility. And we've just lost that.
I think if a lot of people are a victim of anything, it's a victim of not being taught to take responsibility for themselves. It's a victim of our culture. We've created these people that are unable to make themselves and their lives better for whatever reason. There could be any reason, but there's a lot of people that just don't see it that way, and they've not been taught that they have control over their lives and that they can do things that they want to do. There's kids that grow up thinking they'll never get a house because they'll never be able to afford one because they'll always be poor. That's a mindset that's ingrained in kids. And that hurts me to hear it. When I hear kids talk like that, I always correct them. I say, what are you talking about? You will do in your life what you allow yourself to do. Don't put restrictions on that. Don't put don't go, I grew up poor and therefore that's my station in life. That's not how it works. But I think some of that in the UK is a little bit deep rooted because we still have a class system, and that's been there forever and ever and ever. And so, you know, it is easy to slip into the mindset of, I grew up poor, I grew up on benefits, you call it welfare, don't you? So I grew up on benefits, and therefore that is the way I'm always going to be. I mean, I grew up on benefits and I thought that was the way it was always going to be. And it's just not. You do have more control over your life than you think, even if it's difficult. And if it's difficult, it's even more worth doing because you need to be able to achieve overcome some sort of hardship and achieve something for yourself to realize what it is that you've got and what it is that you can do in your life. You can do more. If you achieve something, you can do more. Even going from benefits to getting a job is such a boost. You're just like, oh wow, I've got a job, I can do this now. Oh wow, I've got a flat, I can do this now. It's stepping up, it's leveling up, and it does wonders for your mindset and for your health and mental health. I mean, I think it does just improve you, and it doesn't have to be just that. Like, this is going to sound really preachy, but I joined the gym in February, and I honestly think that saved my life in some ways. I'm getting a little bit religious about it, but it's really transformed my mentality to the point where on the days that I don't go to the gym, I can feel the difference in my mindset, if that makes sense. And I can feel the difference in my mindset when I eat bad or when I drink a load of beer, and then the next day I'm like, why have I done that to myself? But I don't do it to myself all the time anymore. Like, I used to just eat what I want, do what I want, don't sleep, burn the candle at both ends, do whatever. And I think people are lacking that sense of control, that they can control their lives, that they can make things happen that they want to happen, that they can eliminate things in their lives that are not good for them. I don't think people feel like they can do stuff like that. They don't feel truly empowered.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, you know, if you grow up being told like, and people will tell this to kids who are growing up in bad situations, like, you know, statistically these kids will never get out of this and they'll be this and this and this. Okay, yes, statistically, but you keep just pounding this in these kids' heads and they're just going to believe it, because you get told something enough times, you just believe it, right? And so like you grow up and you don't have any work ethic, and you don't have a good family, and you don't have any hope or any drive, a shit life. But if you just get out of that and just wake up and go, holy, like I have the power to control what happens from here on out. And if like that was my big wake up call. And like my husband really actually helps me with that. And he was like, hey, like, you know, I was like, when we got together, I was like 19 years old. I was homeless. I was living out of freaking 2 duffel bags, just carrying them around town.
God, we've got so
Like-
much in common. Unreal. It's unreal.
But yeah, like, and he was just like, hey, like, it's time to wake up. It's time to go get a job. It's time to get your feet wet in the adult world. And like, he had been working for years at that point, like, and he's a few years older than me, but he's had a job ever since high school, you know? And I did. And I actually got a job working at a farm, and I worked my ass off, and I busted ass every single day. And I would go to like horse shows, and I would work 16, 18-hour days, like just a week straight, 2 weeks straight, 3 weeks straight, no breaks. And that like beat into me work ethic. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It was a big change. And from then on out, I was like, okay, I understand. And I had been around like that kind of environment before, but man, like actually doing the work and then being able to like go buy your own food, being able to go pay your own bills, that just hits different for me. And like that, like to me, that's a sign of success. It's never getting your electricity shut off. Like that, having a full fridge. That's literally success. I don't even care. Like, I don't care if it's in a shack. Like if you have electricity and a full fridge and heat, you're living like a king. Like, yeah. And I think, we just have so many amenities and luxuries at this point. People just don't realize that, you know?
Oh, I definitely think there's, me and my partner were talking about this, right? So I came up with this phrase. I made it up. I don't know if it's good or not, but I said, we're sort of like, there's a lot of people that are luxury poor. So they're poor, they haven't got any money, they're sort of like might be trapped in a job they don't like, they're like sort of poor in terms of they don't feel like they can do the things they want, they don't have any spare money to go on holiday or anything like that. That's like normal for us. And but we've got lots of luxuries. We've got the internet, we've got an iPad, we've got a nice flat, we've got lots of things in it that you wouldn't have had before. Got like a Netflix subscription so you can watch endless amounts of things. You don't have to go and pay to go to the cinema. You know, there's a lot of luxuries. You've got nice clothes, you've got makeup, you've got food in the fridge, you've got a freezer. You know, people wouldn't have had a freezer like 60 years ago or whatever. And we can fill the freezer up, and then we don't have to buy food every single day. We can buy it in advance and all that stuff. But we still feel poor. There's that going on as well. It feels like cognitive dissonance, and especially compared to what poverty is in other parts of the world compared to what poverty is here, it's a crazy difference.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And you know what's also frustrating is the amount of resources that we have available is unlike anything else in, you know, anywhere outside of the Western world practically. And people just do not understand that. They like, I posted a video being really critical of this woman who was claiming that she was homeless, and she was complaining about a food, like a big meal of like rice and meat and veggies and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I got like angry. I was like legitimately angry when I filmed that, because I looked at that and I just thought like, bro, one time when I was a kid, I had to fry up a tortilla and put some like sugar that I found in a sugar packet on it and eat that. And that was my dinner. And I hadn't eaten in like 2 days. But you're a grown ass woman sitting here and complaining about a free meal just handed to you. And that like the response I got from that was so many people are just completely outraged. You don't know her situation, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I'm pretty sure that lady was around the same age. And I know damn well that I would never let myself get to that point again. You know, like I grew up in that way, and I don't care what I have to do. I will never allow like my kids to go hungry or myself to go, you know what I mean? Like and it's just really frustrating. It's that mentality of victimhood and victim, and like you can't do anything ever. And no, you can, and you don't want to do the work, and if you don't want to do the work, your life isn't going to change, point blank, period. And
I'm torn on that one. I'm torn on it because I do come from a background of being on benefits and, single mum and that, and we had our moments. And I very much feel it when you say you'll never let yourself get that way again. I'm the same. And I've had times when I've been homeless as well. And I say homeless, I think I was a little bit hopeless. I'm just like wondering, what do I do? I don't know what do I do? Who am I? What is this all about? Like how do I do anything? It's a little bit hopeless, that sort of situation. And I'm not saying that's true for everybody, and that's why I'm torn on it, because I think for some people, they've been dealt a really bad hand, like a really dark hand in life, and they end up in situations that are dark and difficult to get out of. But again, it does come back to them not being taught or offered any sort of real guidance. A lot of people are quick to throw money at a homeless person, but nobody wants to sit down and write down a business plan for them to how to get a job or like things like that. No, people don't want to sit down and talk them through how to get a bank account so that they can apply for somewhere to live and things like that. People don't feel, I don't think other people feel overwhelmed by the prospect of helping people with that as well.
What's frustrating too is like I've opened up my home to people that I know who were homeless, who didn't have anywhere to go, and every single time I got screwed over in the process. Every single time.
Yeah, there's people like that as well.
Way, and so like I get, just from my own upbringing and like my parent especially, it was like she was dealt a bad hand, okay? And she was. But she used that as an excuse for the entirety of my life to not do anything about it and to be a victim.
I've known people like that as well.
Yeah, and to live in her own misery. And that's like, I was just surrounded by that. I was surrounded by people, like the same people who I used to party with when I was like 17, 18, 19 years old are living the exact same way in our 30s.
Yeah, I know people like that.
And it's like, I do try really hard to understand, like there are people who just legitimately need a hand up instead of a hand out. But I get a bit more pessimistic because of just all of the personal experiences that I've had that have just shaped me in such a way that, and I fought a lot of victim mentality myself, especially in regards to like just mental health stuff, especially like if you live in your mental illness, basically, if you never figure out how to get out and how to crawl your way out of it, then like that's never going to benefit you. Like there's a lot of people who just live within their mental illness instead of,
I think as well, there's like
how to live, like in general.
I think some people, I don't know if it's personality types or what it is, but I think some people are more prone to falling into being like maybe addicted to victim mentality. And I don't think I was ever addicted to victim mentality, but I think I'm prone to victim mentality and I'm prone to feeling like a victim. So I work very hard to resist that because I see it as poison. So every time, and I think there are situations where you are legitimately justified to feel like a victim because you have been victimized by life or something's happened to you. But I don't think it's healthy to dwell on it and to stay in that headspace for too long, because that is poison. And that is, to me, the equivalent of, I don't know, drinking vodka every day. You're poisoning yourself. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I think, but I don't know if there's personality types that are more prone to that, or if that's just a random thing and you don't know that all different types of people could fall into that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to me because it almost seems like, when something really bad happens to you, there's like a period of almost like akin to like grieving, basically, where like you have to deal with this. You have to like acknowledge what occurred. You have to almost like just let yourself, feel all those things. And then you have to pick yourself up and you have to keep going, because what else do you have? What else is going to happen? And I had a lot of really, really bad things happen to me, before I even hit like 21, and just constant like loss and horrible things happening to me and people hurting me and stuff like that. And the only thing that ever helped my mentality is just figuring out how to move forward and figuring out how to pick myself up instead of just laying on the floor destitute and feeling so, like, and it is really exactly what you said. People they're hopeless. They don't know how to do better. They don't know where to go. And I think that's why it's really important for people like Jordan Peterson, especially, to have a voice and to share his message, because man, like that man has helped me so much.
I was about to say the same thing.
My mentality in a lot of ways, like, and people like that. And there's a lot of people who, are labeled as like hateful and horrible and all of this. But if you just listen to what they're saying, you just listen to the grand message that they're trying to promote, it's like, wow, like that is so impactful and it resonates so much. And I think people like, there's some people online like Zuby, like I really liked him, and I just kind of got into like a lot of his content, and he just seems very wonderful in general. But like, I just always love that just realness and not being afraid to say the truth behind things, but still having like a big, Jordan Peterson has such a deep level of like compassion for people. And it's frustrating that people just fail to see that when he has compassion when it's deserved, and I think that's
I don't understand how people don't see him as a really sensitive, kind and thoughtful man, because that's what he is. Like he's a tiny little bit dramatic sometimes. Like the other day I heard him talking about troll demons, and I actually spat my tea, and I was like, oh my god, what a drama queen. But he's such a sincere man. Like there's a lot of people that have a lot to say about authenticity at the moment. If you want authenticity, look at Jordan Peterson. You couldn't get more truthful than him. He's even if it shoots him in the foot and for whatever crazy reason people want to have a go at him, he'll still say it. He'll still put it out there. And it's just, to me, that was really inspiring. He got me through a lot of hard times listening to him, because when I got cancelled and I was listening to him, I'd listened to him a little bit before and I liked him, but a lot of it kind of went over my head. I didn't really care too much. But when I got cancelled, it really resonated with me. And a lot of what he says is about sticking up for yourself because no one else is going to, giving a shit about yourself because no one else is going to give as much a shit about you as you do. And if you do give that much of a shit about yourself, you need to do something about making your life better, big or small. Something needs to change. If you're unhappy, you're in a bad situation, there's bad things happening to you, something needs to change, and only you can do that. And that, to me, is the core of his message. And I find it fascinating that other people that like him have a different idea of what the core of his message is. But that is the beauty of being a different person that listens in a different way,
Yeah. And it's very frustrating to me because it's like Jordan Peterson, had he been around when I was like 18 years old, he would have saved me a whole lot of stuff.
The same thing. And there's so many people that are like, some people sort of online refer to him as like the dad that people need. Like, I so wish he was my dad so much. Yeah. I'm like, man, I wish, like, I don't know, I had a dad growing up. He was not my biological dad, but he was a good dad to me. But he weren't always there, and then he died as well. So there's that going on. So I didn't really feel like I had a dad. And I wish that I had Jordan Peterson, maybe not as, even if he's not dad, I wish I had the internet and him talking to me. I wish I could listen to him or read his books when I was 15, when I was 14, when I was 15, when I really needed to know some of these things before I go out into the world.
Yeah. And I, again, relate so much because I have a really weird backstory too, but I was adopted by circumstances. So like my biological parents died when I was a baby. And then I grew up, I had family members take me, but then when I was 4, my adoptive dad died as well.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot to go through.
Yeah. So, and I didn't know I was like adopted until I was like about 13 years old. But I grew up without a dad. And then when I was about 8, my grandpa, who was like a father figure to me, he died as well. And just over and over, like just constant loss of people. And that was like really, really difficult. And I've heard Jordan Peterson talk so much about that sort of thing and about loss and about trying to figure out how to handle just huge events that are completely out of your control. And it's helped me so much, even in just the, you know, I don't know, the 5 years or so that I've listened to him, however long it's been at this point. And he always just makes me think so much deeper and so much more critically, even if like there's a lot of things where I'm like, this is like outside my wheelhouse. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, this is some like I gotta like listen a few times for the message to really sink in. But he's just let me think about things in such a different way. And I think it's really important. Like, he's very purpose driven. Like, you need to find your purpose, and you need to find what you can use to catapult you forward. And I think that's what most people are missing is that purpose and that drive and the ambition to get there. Because if you don't know where you want to go, how are you going to get started? You know, like,
and also like having the confidence to be honest with yourself about where you want to be in life as well. Like, I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, but like, and when you're a kid, you can say that, oh, I want to be an artist, and everybody thinks it's cute. But when you're a teenager and you say you want to be an artist, in my personal experience, I got shut down a lot. I got told I need to grow up, I need to be realistic. And to me, I just didn't know what that meant. I was like, and I wish I'd had somebody when I was younger saying, okay, you want to be an artist, well, these are the things you need to do. You need to work hard on what your art is going to be and how you're going to get it out to people, how you're going to sell it and how you're going to make it. And you need materials for art, you need canvas, you need paint. Well, maybe you need to get a job and buy those materials. You know, people didn't know, nobody guided me in that way. But I feel like with people like Jordan Peterson out there, there's that bit of guidance that a lot of kids might be missing out on, a lot of young people and adults. And I know that Jordan Peterson's known for appealing to young men, but I think his message appeals to everybody. I think it's universal.
Yeah. And I had the same exact thing done to me because I wanted to be a writer. And that's another real vague, like, you know what I mean? Like, I had the exact same, no, you're never going to make a living that way. You're never going to have a job that way. You're never going to do this. Told. You know, and you need to go to school. You need to do this and that. And, you know, I had family members who really, really, really wanted me to get into like the medical field because you always have a job and all of these things. And, you know, I feel like I wasted a lot of my time working in jobs where I could have been like, I had written the idea off, basically thinking like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, I'm never going to make it. It's never going to go anywhere. Maybe I'll write a book one day in my spare time, but I never really had a push to do that. And because I thought it was a waste of my time. And now that I've, you know, once I became a stay-at-home mom, I started freelancing actually. It was like a while after I had my kids. Because I took about like 6 months off, and then I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to like cover my portion of the bills that I pay, and I want to, you know, just be able to continue doing that and not have my husband feel immense financial like pressure, basically. So I kind of started doing that, and I started freelancing, and then I became like a copywriter and a copy editor, and so I was like, oh, okay, like. And now kind of being in this like sphere of like social media and sharing my thoughts and my opinions and finding things like Substack and stuff like that. It's like, well, no, like I can actually be able to write things that I care about and share them with the world. And whoever wants to listen has the opportunity to do so now. And I think that's really incredible and important. And as much as social media really irritates me sometimes, and sometimes I think like this should have never been introduced to the planet, like it's immensely powerful as well when it's utilized correctly. And I think I want to really get back to more of a place where we can do like what we're doing. We can have honest, actual conversations and share ideas and point out what we think are flawed ideas and bad ideas, and give people the opportunity to watch that play out in real time. You know, it's like, I don't understand like the problem with silencing whatever you think is a bad idea is how would we ever know what's good and what's bad if we're not allowed to actually hear the bad ideas?
I agree with you completely. And I think as well, like with this conversation we're having, we're just sort of like filling each other out a little bit, sort of figuring each other out and having a general conversation. But would you be up for coming back sometime, maybe in a couple of months, and we'll maybe pick a subject that we might not align on and talk about it and like see how we navigate that? We don't have to do the whole episode about that. We can talk about things we do agree on as well. But I think that would be interesting because I think people need to be shown examples of that a bit more as well. I think people are not, because everybody's like, there's a lot of young people that are growing up with social media straight away in their lives. And they're learning that just blocking out views that you don't like is the way to go through life. Not that I'm saying young people listen to my channel, because I don't think they do, but it's not a bad idea to have it out there anyway. Like, I know there's a lot of people doing debates and things, but I'm not that interested in having an argument. I just want to have a conversation. What do you think? Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I definitely would love to do that. I hate debates. They make me incredibly like nervous because funnily enough, I actually really hate confrontation.
Yeah, me too.
So it's like having a conversation is much more like relaxed for me. And instead of like knowing I'm going into this like to be like combative.
Yeah, I don't want us to go into it with our points of view and we're going to battle it out. I'd rather pick a subject and be like, well, what do you think about this? How did you come to that conclusion? This is my conclusion and how I came to that conclusion, and see if there's anything we can learn from each other about why we came to the conclusions we came to.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think it sounds like really
cool.
Good idea.
That would be really cool. We'll think of something that we might disagree on. We'll have a little think.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to. I think we could definitely find some area, but yeah,
I reckon.
I think it would be really good. And it also can show like you can relate with somebody on a whole lot of things, and you can agree on a whole lot of things, but there's going to be things you disagree on, and that's a good thing as well. So
yeah, I think so. Well, Ashley, it's been like absolutely lovely to talk to you, even though I've never met you before. Like, this is my first meeting you, and it's been brilliant. And I'd really like to say thank you for having the balls to come and talk to me, somebody you don't know, and then just be like, yeah, all right, I'll talk to you. I think that's great. And I think there needs to be more of that. I think more people need to just be open a little bit to talking to each other, like within reason, of course. You don't have to be open to talking to a maniac who's like trying to insult you or whatever. But, you know, I really appreciate you coming to talk to me. And I think we should wrap it up, if that's all right with you. And I hope everybody's enjoyed the conversation. I certainly have. Is there anything you would like to say before we go?
No, again, thank you so much for reaching out. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think you're a wonderful person.
Thank you. You are too.
And I really enjoyed this, and I enjoy speaking to you further.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you again and speaking to you again. I'll keep an eye on your TikTok and that. I didn't know you on YouTube though, so I'll give you a follow on there. What's your YouTube channel?
You can find me everywhere basically at Freely Ashley.
Freely
I'm
Ashley.
On YouTube. Yep, I'm on Twitter. I'm on all the big ones. So I try.
You're on Twitter. I'm going to follow you on Twitter. I'm going to give you a follow. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, Freely Ashley, and I'll see you again in a few months.
All right. Have a great one.
Early in the morning, as the sun comes up, I just wanna have a cup. There's one drink, that's the one for me. Won't you please make me a cup of tea?